Flutter 3.1 release, Dart free release, a new version for Serverpod, and a brand new AI card game called Google Flip? Well, my name is Max, and this and much more now in the Flutter news. We have a new release for Dart, and as discussed in the last Flutter news, actually, we talked about the 100% sound null safety. Isn't it great? It's finally there. Improvements for performance, removing compiler stuff, and with that we have finally get rid of a lot of boilerplate. So if you switch to Flutter 3, you will probably feel a performance boost again, which is always great. Additionally, the migration should be smooth as sailing because the top 1000 packages have been already migrated to Dart free and are ready to use for your convenience. And if we are with it, there are major language features, record patterns and class modifiers. If you have ever worked for a big language like Dart, you know how much time it takes till such features are implemented. So it's a crazy milestone that they have that finally out of the pipeline. And the coolest things, in my opinion, are records, because all of us will use them in the future. And as you can see, it was the 4th highest rated issue. So it is really something. And if we have a quick look what they are, that's a new annotation in Dart, and it's with the round brackets. And this allows us to directly create such records, and that allows us also in the future to have patterns with it. All cool stuff. I had a look into it because that gives us the opportunity, for example, for multiple returns. As you can see here, we return this new record object, and inside of here, we get a string and an integer. Great stuff. With that, we have the possibility to get this data where we need it, and that will probably make it easier to work, for example, with JSONs, that we don't have to exactly create a whole class with all the boilerplate. We can just use the records. And that's also cool because it automatically defines the question, so the equal operator and the hash code operation. So that means if a record is the same as another record, you can directly check that here. That's pretty cool, and I really enjoy that to see. Another thing that we can do now with records are, for example, patterns and pattern matching. What does that mean? So let's say we have a record that we get from user info here, and now we can use these strings directly inside of our function. So you can see we deconstructed here the variables that we receive from the user info here. So we got a height and a name out of it. That's pretty cool. If we want to ignore one of these things, we have the underscore pattern. That means if you make an underscore, you just skip that one. You don't be interested. Another cool thing is the Dart team increases and improved the switch cases. That means now we have the possibility to have cases. And as you can see already, we have way more options. We can now equal here. We have the possibility to work without a break operator, which was not possible before. And the coolest part of it is, where is it? We have a new, how do you call that? Yep, syntax for switch statements. As you can see here, if it's 1, then the case, we have this text. If it's 6 or 7, we have this text, and so on and so forth. And this works with expressions, and this switch statements getting way easier to understand with this syntax. And I'm really looking forward to see you using that more and more. As I said already, they are exhaustive. That means, for example, here we have a switch case, and it is a bit hard to read, but you can see we have a sealed class animal. That is a cow, sheep, and pig. And if we switch now over A, which is an animal, so all of them more or less, then we have the cow C as sheep S. But as you see, we did not define the pig here. And with that, we receive an error message telling us, hey, you have to make the pig also work. There is a lot of going forward here. And as you can see, we can use these patterns also in if statements. So if a JSON file contains something, then we can directly use this as a variable. And inside of the next print statement, we use that variable. That will make our code more short, and that could increase our performance in development again. Isn't it great? I'm so excited. And down in the video descriptions below, I add you the code labs and all the documentation. So check it out if you want to see more about it. Another feature in Dart free is fine-grained controls for class modifiers. That will not be so interesting for all of us, but especially the people who are creating APIs or people who are creating libraries for Dart and Flutter, have now the opportunity to fine-grain the control of their classes so that the other libraries don't use their methods, names, static variables, and so on. And that leads or reduces the problem of a fragile class method, which I also had to read, which is very interesting. So if you are interested in that, there is the possibility that the naming of two classes is exactly the same and they create problems with each other. And also that works with parent classes. So you could create, unfortunately, some recursive methods inside of the same library. Mind blowing. If you don't know about it, just have a read. Fragile method this. I put a link down in the video description so that you know what I know. But with that, we have now these interface classes, base classes, and final classes, which all give you more control about it. An interface class cannot be extended, but will create a contract for others to implement. A base class, which is makes sure that all subtypes of the inherited class have the implementations of its interface. This ensures that private methods are available in all instances. And the last one is the final class. You can close up the type hierarchy, preventing any subclasses outside of your own library as a sample fit. This allows the API owner to add new members without risking breaking changes to the consumer of the API. Sounds very fancy. As I said, if you have the special case where you say, okay, nobody else besides of my library is allowed to use these classes, then you have the opportunity to fine-grain these class instances. All right. So a few towards the future, there we can say Dart language is thriving. You know, Google is really behind that Google Dart and Flutter is successful, and we can see that here. You know, it's a real big commitment to announce Dart 3 and Flutter 3.1 inside of the Google I/O again. That means and shows the energy that they put inside of Dart and Flutter, and I'm really happy about that because I love Flutter. So what you can see here is they want to work on several things. For example, if you have feedback for the patterns, you have problems here, you can share feedback. If you want to have a look inside of the inline classes and primary constructors, this is things that they want now to have a look into. They are completely non-breaking and will just add more developer productivity. And the last thing is they want to introduce something like meta programming, which would allow, for example, JSON deserialization to be a bit faster. It's a workaround, for example, for the build runner, and will include that more in the language. They don't give a concrete timeline, and honestly, how I know how long the definitions of things will take, how long it will take to really implement these things, I would not think that this will be ready this year. But let's see. I'm happy to be surprised. Also, they want to check if they can set up more native interop. Dart FFI was in the last Flutter news quite a big topic, where we saw how we can now create modules inside of FFI and create this in the pubspec.yaml and then create the code out of the native code, which was pretty cool. I really have to take a look into it. I want to create a presentation for that. So maybe in the next presentation, I will show you there a bit more. But what they want to work, and they're working on expanding the support for Java and Kotlin interop for Android, and Objective-C and Swift interop for iOS and macOS. There was a cool video in Google I/O 23, link down in the video description as always. The next part, I was very interested because WebAssembly is always on my list and I already had looked into it. And a lot of people were saying, Flutter Web still too slow and needs to be better and things like that. So with that, browsers like Chromium and Firefox could actually execute Dart code, or more or less like a native language with WASM-GC standard. And that brings me to a thing I put also down in the video description, the link to this WASM-GC, because it's interesting to read again the specification for such tools. We use these things on an everyday basis, but I am sure most of us have never really read these specifications, and it's great to know these things. First of all, you can be the king of any conversation who didn't want to talk about WASM-GC or WASM-GC. And yeah, but that gives us a load time improvement, performance improvement, and semantic consistency. This is not implemented yet, but as you can see, this whole specification is now near stable for Chromium and Firefox browsers, which is still 90% of the market. And with that, we have now more interest in Dart and Flutter in the future, probably, which is still a good thing. Yeah, and that's it for Dart 3. So next station, Kevin was writing again an article. He is, I think, product manager from the Flutter team. And what we can see here is Flutter 3.1, incredible. It is so much. As you can see already at the scroll bar, we don't have any time to waste. It's so much stuff, so that I will probably also jump about some things. Let's begin with material free, and holy fuzzy cat, there are a lot of changes. You can now provide images as a color seed from it and create pleasant UIs. I love that. As you can see, we have these images down here now, and it will take the color seed from it, creates the shapes of it. Navigation bar looks now great. Navigation drawer, I think I will jump quickly over them. Another thing that I love is the new date time picker. As you can see, we have now a text field, and we can switch easily to the text field to it and to the date picker. That gives us more interaction. Users will probably like that. Hopefully, if not, you can still use the old one. But things like that is pretty cool. I know, for example, that at my former workplace, they hated this time picker and I had to remove it and just add a text field, and people were happy. So I think this will be a big adjustment and a big benefit here. Good. Bottom sheets, list updates. I think you can go over them yourself. Another interesting thing is now the native support for the text field updates in M3. That includes triple clicks, triple taps, triple click and drag. And as you can see, things are getting a little bit wild. But you know, these fields will, or these things will be important, that Flutter native is getting more and more happiness during the customers. Another thing that I'm looking always through is that Fuchsia, or Fuchsia in German, is always a part of it. And I cannot wait. I still have to create a video where I just install Fuchsia somewhere, or Fuchsia, and try playing with it, maybe develop something in it. It sounds like a live stream event. All right, and that brings me to a thing in own interest. I created a mentorship program, and in this mentorship program, I'd explain everything I know from my software engineering experience. And as you can see, I have already a mentee. We have big 5-star rating. If you are interested in leveraging your Flutter and the Dart skills, check out the link down in the video description below. It helps my work here. It supports me. It would be amazing to see you there. Flutter supports now Salsa level 1. So first of all, I needed to Google what SLSA is, even though that I'm a senior developer with a lot of working experience. I had no idea. It is usually used in military tech and very defensive development parts, but it's also interested for us usual developers. And I read a little bit into it, and I have made a summary for that, so I will read that quickly. I hope that's okay. So let's say a software compiles with supply chain levels for software level 1. It means the software has complied with a set of basic security and integrity standards in its production process, making it more trustworthy and less likely to contain security flaws or vulnerabilities. In the level 1 especially, it goes for dependencies. That means, as you can see, they have now created build scripts, multi-party approval, and auto audit locking and provenance. Cool things to know. But what that means is it creates more or less shields that not all code can be pushed and that everyone can create and add a new library to it. That being said is that the software will most likely not contain any malicious software. I was very interested in that because I thought, hey, Flutter team Google, they will be so big. Why is it now only the case? I mean, they exist since 2018, I think, or 2017 even. And since now, they did not have this certification. And if you think about it, how many dependencies there exist probably in the framework, in the UI toolkit, then you know how hard it is to get this ELF1 really inside of the package. So I'm really thrilled about that because that gives again a new boost for Flutter. For all the people who are cybersecurity experts, you will probably tell me I'm right if I say Flutter got now a big milestone out of the door. But now let's have a look into web improvements. I don't know, but it seems that Flutter focuses a lot in web at the moment, which is cool. But we will see in a second that iOS also got some pretty nice things. Before I jump too far, let's read. This release reduces file size because, glyphs have been removed from Material and Cupertino icons. Canvas Kit reduces the size for all browsers. That's interesting because the flavor of Canvas Kit, which is inside of the Chromium-based parts, can now use a better CDN that is the Google's leading CDN, and this will improve the performance even further. Will not work in Firefox, so that means Google and Chromium browsers will always be better for Flutter, probably. Element embedding. There we had a cool video from the Flutter forward where we could see how Flutter web apps now have specific elements in the page. So also here I will add you these cool documentation to it. But As you know, now you have the possibility to have a web application. Let's say you have already a full stacked Angular application or React Native application, but this little tiny part, you want to have it with Flutter. Now with that, you can do it. You can merge it into one. Pretty cool. Then we have shader support for web apps. Shader support. Shaders are little programs that work on your GPU, like on your graphical unit. And with that, we have now shader support in the web. I'm curious how that turns out. I think some experts are there. Please leave it in the comments how much you feel that shader improvements here, because I could imagine you can use that for games or something, but I don't know if a default app will do that. On the other hand, engine upgrade. In 3.7 there was already a stable release with preview of Impeller. Now it is the per se default renderer, and that will speed up the app tremendously for iOS. That means complex screens will reduce their usage on GPU and CPU. There will be extended battery life, as you can think about, because if you don't have to calculate so much. Then there was something that I found interesting, the color gamut. I did not know what a gamut is. That's a wide range or a wider range of colors. So probably interesting for a lot of you. So there were a shout out, so I do that too. Cold Pale Light and Lucky SMG, thank you so much for your work in the GitHub repository of Flutter to make it possible to remediate the problems with the performance here. As you also can see, if you can still choose to opt out of Impeller, that means you can still use the old Skia renderer. There are still a lot of things inside of running on the legacy Skia framework, but in general, in the long run, the plan is to remove Skia completely, to have more flutters, to reduce the flutter size even further. All right, then there is some progress on the Vulkan. If you want to check out the project board, link down in the video description. As I said, there is now performance improvements in general. That means, for example, there are now possibilities to increase the some under the hood graphical things, especially for iOS again. Lucky SMG made here a good job to find how he can triple the frame rate from time to time. As you can see here in this nice little graphic, a third of the load has been removed more or less if you have a lot of images. And yeah, as you can see, micro benchmarks improved by 50%. Really great stuff, but it's under the hood. You probably will not be so much affected besides of having a much smoother animation at most places. That also fixes also the startup latency here. As you can see, reduced by 100 milliseconds, about 30 to 50% in large production application. That's a lot. Yeah, reducing the size even further, I think nothing too important. We have the stability updates, so it's getting more stable in general, especially with the GPU driver. I think that makes sense, especially with Impeller now in place and also the shader support. They want to have a look here. Then we have API improvements, and for example, the APNG decoder is now possible. APNG is a file format, and now it's possible to use that right out of the box without any additional work here, which is pretty cool. Then there has been some updates under the hood for the images again, Dart UI upgrade for mobile. The first thing is a huge thing. I love that to hear, because now iOS wireless debugging is possible. No more need to search my cables. I can finally work my Flutter iOS app directly here, mobile, do it. Pretty cool. As I said already, white gamut. Gamut is this new color range. Maybe I add here an image from that, but now we can use that thanks to Impeller and can create that. So the important is you have to use Impeller here. You cannot do that with Skia, which also makes sense somehow. Then we have spell check support. I think that's nice to have, but not the most important thing. That means for all the Cupertino text elements, we have now spell checker for everyone who's using that. Happy days. Then we have adaptive checkbox and radio. Adaptive in this case means that they behave on desktop exactly the same as on mobile and on web regarding to their platform that they are on. So depending on the platform, it will behave a little bit different. It will look a little bit different. And with that, we have that implemented directly inside of Flutter. Yeah, for Cupertino also new updates like the material design, getting a bit more cleaner, getting more into the new iOS system colors and so on and so forth. I think that's clear that they want to hold up the promise that Flutter is supporting iOS and Android, or more or less Material and the design system from Apple exactly in balance. I'm sure that Apple still needs a little bit more work, but I'm still happy that they improve here again, because that will help developers all over the globe, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, then again, improvements in performance for platform views, which is great. macOS and iOS can now use shared code in plugins. I love that. The code is nearly the same usually, and now with a plugin in the pubspec.yaml, you can now share the code between these two, and you don't have to write everything again. So that makes it a bit easier in general, and you don't have to copy files like crazy. New resources for app extensions. I did not even know that because I never created one so far, but maybe that has to change. Sounds like a good new video topic. They added new documentation for Flutter developers, how to use iOS app extensions. That will create, for example, home screen widgets and share extensions and things like that directly underneath of the text or keyboard that you have. To simplify creating home screen widget and sharing data, we added new methods. Okay, that's beautiful. But yeah, and there are new resources for cross-platform design, which is always a good thing. I really like. Then we have Android Camera X support. If you did not know, there is a new plugin from Jetpack, which is an Android framework, and it's simplifying the usage of the camera. And yeah, Google is promoting Camera X quite a lot. And now you can do that directly in Flutter and replace more or less the Flutter camera plugin. For that, you have to add two new dependencies, and then you can try it out if it works for you. Make sure that Camera X is working on your device, and if you find any issues, they ask, or the team of Flutter is asking that you create issues for it. So use the Camera X. It has a lot of extensions, a lot of picture material. You can add all that stuff that you need today. I think the kids today need. And with that, you have all the possibilities here. I'm sorry, I'm not the camera people, so difficult for me.
Use cases are preview, image capture, video capture, and image analysis.
Then we have the DevTools. In the DevTools, also a lot have changed. We use now Material Free, which is pretty cool. The console supports now evaluation of a running app. And the Perfetto, I find that one interesting because in my last CI/CD videos, I talked about Perfetto quickly. And it's interesting that they now include Perfetto, which is a Google product. It's for profiling, app tracing, and so on. They add that now inside of the DevTools. That could be two things. First of all, very good for us developers because we can now pin threads and interesting things. We can see now SQL queries, clicking on, dragging on multiple timelines. Beautiful. But a second part is they promote their own product. So if it's good and it works, we can maybe think to have that also on our servers. So I really find that very interesting here. So there are a lot of changes. Then breaking changes, not so many. As you can see, there are some from 3.7 to here, but Dart Fix has them all included. So if you want, or if you have some issues here, try Dart Fix and maybe you have no problem at all. This one I found particularly funny. Android Studio Flamingo upgrade is a new version of Android Studio, and it delivers a new Java SDK. So if you have not run your or installed your Flutter Java SDK per se alone, it will fall back to this version. And the interesting part is the Gradle version earlier than 7.3 can't run on Java 17. There is now Flutter Analyze suggestion, which helps you to validate if you have this issue. And if you have the issue, they also created a migration guide how you can get around that. I tried it now 3 times. I did not have this information, so I tried it myself. It was not so difficult. I think you will manage easily here. Okay, then we have Windows single deprecation. That means we don't have a singleton for window anymore. I think that makes sense. And apps and libraries relying on that should migrate away from it. This prepares multi-window support for Flutter in the future, which makes sense. So we don't want to have in a desktop application that you have only one window. With that, we can now create multiple ones. Cool. And that's it for Flutter 3. Crazy release. As I said, it shows just how much Google cares about Flutter and Dart, and it shows how big they are in investing in this system, and it shows how strong the the Flutter and Dart environment in general is. Just to add a quick side note, I opened Google Trends and just checked quickly the different trendings, and as you can see, happily everything goes up again after the AI hype. I think that was this one, and now we can see Flutter is so much more interesting for people at the moment than React Native and Ionic. It's crazy. So cross-mobile, cross-platform development, Flutter it is. So let's come to the Flutter package of the week, or more framework of the week, I would say. And Dart and Flutter and server side, crazy. As you know me, I'm a backend developer by heart. I develop both with love, and Serverpod makes it very cool to create full stack applications with our famous languages that we love the most, Dart and Flutter. And it has a whole creation of everything. So that means it creates your APIs, endpoints, server-side technology, and connects directly with the client side. If you know how Swagger is working or OpenAPI, then you probably know also how this is working. It uses ORM to connect with a database. And if you are familiar with Docker, if you are knowing Docker, you can use that and they will create automatically a Docker container for it with all the loggings, health checks, and so on and so forth. And they have now a new version 101, which is even better for their CLI because it enables new possibilities. I really recommend to use it or to at least try it out because it's crazy superior to other backend frameworks that I know. For example, the Aqueduct one that has been removed or Conduit at the moment. It is a full package. The tooling is incredible big. So if you have doubts or if you are not so familiar with all these things like Postgres, Redis, what is a database, how is the full stack is working, you will need some time to really get into it. And as you can see in the documentation, it's quite massive, the whole thing. But if you need a solution for backend and front end, this is the way to go. So check it out. Another cool thing that I found very interesting is that, as always at Google I/O, they present something very cool. And this time it was the card game that uses a lot of AI to generate the images, to generate all the behavior and things like that, and put it inside of a game. And sadly, I still cannot use Bard, so I can't give you any idea how Bard is compared to anything else, but that shows you already how good the different AI tools are. And it is really cool because I love the animations. It gives you an overview how Flutter can work in game development and things like that. And if you check the search, you get a whole information about how the game is working. And yeah, it makes just fun. It's really not too bad. It's a real good game. It makes fun to choose a lot of the team classes and things. So let's be a sailor for this case. And my special case is the astrology, because you know me, I'm so funky. You get a Dart deck, and if you check it out, you can now choose cards. So let's say I like the Sailor Dash and the Sailor Sparkling and the Astrology Android. I can join a match. And now it's just searching randomly for opponents. And I don't know if you know the auto match with the pets. I think auto pets matching or something. That is exactly the same way. Now you place that, he plays something, and at the end the fight begins, and I lost in this case. Boom. Yeah, it doesn't look too good. Now I have to choose another card, and so on and so forth. And this is the whole game. Check it out, I really liked it, and yeah. Alright, and that's it with the Flutter news for this time. I really hope you learned something today. I was really intrigued. Let me know down in the comments below, what is your favorite feature and what are you looking mostly forward to in the future for Dart and Flutter? And also, yeah, check out Serverpod, give me a like and a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, check out the Mentorship Program. There are also tons of news of this channel, so make sure to check out the town hall meeting that will happen at the end of the month. And if you are interested in this video, you should really click it, and then we see us there. Enjoy the rest of your day.